And we are recording.
Okay, so welcome everybody. I'd like to call tonight's special meeting to order for the presentation, the final presentation from Weston and Sampson, read the recreational plan presentation with Daniel Biggs and Rochelle McKnight. And with that, I believe that Eric has some opening comments.
Those were my opening.
I ruined it for you, sorry.
So much.
Okay, so I guess we'll jump right to Weston and Sampson.
All right, hold on a moment. Let me open them up. All right. Rochelle, do you want to unmute?
Absolutely.
There you go. And Daniel, your audio is live.
Yeah, I'm good. Shannon, can you give us control or?
I will do that.
Oh, someone else is.
Abby.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Sec. Okay, do you want to request the share, please? Daniel?
Yep, let me,
Share and I'll.
good so far?
Here you are.
Looks like too many icons. How's that? Can everyone see my screen? Oh,
Good.
almost. Almost. Oh, it's jumping the screen. Well, let me see. That's weird. Rochelle, you want to start while I get this?
Sure, I can certainly do that.
Okay.
Well, you all, it's great to be here. We wish that we could be there in person. That would be so much more fun. We've really, really enjoyed working with you all, and we're kind of sad to see you go. But we're also glad that we're in the final chapter of the master plan here and that we're able to have this presentation with you despite the current circumstances with COVID. So thank you to everybody who is here tonight with us, who's taking the time to get on yet another virtual meeting. I know a lot of us have a great deal of those these days. So tonight we are going to be reviewing the final master plan. We'll be going over some of the results that we found, a little bit of a background review of what we have talked about in the past in some of our meetings because it's been quite a long time since we've seen you. But then we are going to review mostly the recommendations of the master plan. And to make it clear, we are, since this is a presentation format, we're going to try to keep it relatively succinct. The master plan document itself goes into much greater detail about everything that we'll be explaining tonight. And so with that, Dan, it looks like you've got everything ready and you can take it from here.
You're good. Thanks. So they can click. One sec. Oh, there we go. So thank you, everyone. As Rochelle mentioned, it's sad to see the process conclude, but this is really what we see as the starting point for you all to move forward with actually implementing a plan and getting the ideas we've pulled forward from the community and all of our thoughts together that's in the document now move forward into actual physical improvements and the benefits of the town to move forward. So we want to cover tonight briefly a little bit of the process, which most of you have been a part of as we started now almost over a year ago. We're going to touch up.
Disappointed, but this team is going to have to get it done without them unless they want to go home by
Appreciate you, Beck.
Sorry, I am looking just at the slideshow, so I don't see if anyone else is talking, but I'll keep on going. Tell me if I need to slow down. We're going to cover a little bit of the planning process, go over some of the overall survey results that we got from the various stakeholder sessions, really touch upon the recommendations, the pieces that we think are projects or improvements that you all can do in the near term and the long term, and then a way to phase that out. We broke up into a couple of different clusters or groupings of projects and to have the implementation plan that you can use for the next several years. So really the overall goal of this was to create a comprehensive trails and venues master plan, really to meet the needs for the recreational, economic, and the overall community needs of the town of Dover. The idea of this, as with most plans, is there's a horizon about 10 to 15 years. We know that takes many different directions on how to implement a plan, from a costing, a staffing, and just overall time necessary for reviews and approvals to get projects in the ground. So it's surely a phased implementation plan that'll take a number of years to implement. As we're going through the whole process, we kept on balancing the needs and the resources within the town to balance as to how can that turn to usable and desired facilities improvements within the town. So we were taking input from everyone, from stakeholders, staff, other outside interested parties, the site resources of what can actually happen on land, and taking all that together through the inventory assessment process, stakeholder input, and creating this draft and final master plan, which we're presenting to you tonight. So we want to run through quickly through some of the overall public engagement input we had, and then we'll step through the recommendations that we developed as a result of these. Michelle?
Yep, I can take it from here. So what we heard, what we're going to kind of go through, we have a lot of information in these slides, but what we're trying to discuss overall are the themes that we heard throughout the master planning process. So to highlight some of this, we heard again and again that people were really wanting to see connections between existing trails in order to be able to get on the trail and go for a greater distance and to have more challenging opportunities, and connections between residential areas and commercial corridors. In particular, people are interested in creating multimodal access opportunities, so non-motorized and ATV access from some of the residential areas throughout Dover to the commercial core of town, and being able to get back and forth even between residential neighborhoods. So we worked quite a bit with a variety of stakeholders to discuss some of those various options. So you can see some of them listed here that came through with the planning process. The other thing that we heard is that East Dover does not have as many recreational opportunities as West Dover at the moment, and certainly most of the commercial development is occurring within West Dover versus East Dover. And some people definitely said, you know, they like it like that. They want to keep it that way. So I think it requires further investigation down the road. I think that's pretty much it on that slide, Dan. So looking at desired new facilities, something that came up quite a bit is that people are looking to expand recreational opportunities in Dover, because at the moment there are a lot of trails and there's a lot of skiing, but it's very evident that recreational demands are changing in the region and in wider recreational venues. And so we did these surveys. We asked people in person as well. The online survey was open for quite a while. And you're looking at some of the numbers here, but 49% of survey respondents, said that they would appreciate to have disc golf in the town of Dover. People talked about ice skating rinks. There was some disagreement about whether or not that would be best planned as an indoor or outdoor facility. There's a number of different ideas within the master plan itself about that. Definitely an expansion of some backcountry skiing trails. There's some great opportunities that are not being utilized right now. And then looking at where the trails are sort of crossing over at the moment, where there might be potentially unsafe circumstances, looking at where snowmobiles and some of the, we call them muscle-powered sports, but biking and hiking and things like that, skiing, might be crossing over and creating conflicts. That in combination with some trails that are on very, very steep slopes or on ridges where they might not have adequate railings to protect people. So working through some of these overall recommendations, we tried to frame things around the major themes that we saw emerging and to go back to some of the recommendations more focused in the survey format. People are very interested in opening Dover as a community to a wide range of recreational users. So that includes multi-generational opportunities, families, definitely a variety of skills. So people who are expert level versus people who are just getting started out. And Dover has extraordinary opportunities in terms of available land to design the types of trails and recreational facilities that would be excellent to accommodate a variety of skill levels. It's very important, again, for people to have access to the commercial core. Part of this project, it was originally established by the Economic Development Department. How do you improve the economy in Dover? And some of that is attracting people back into that commercial core. How can you do that not only for year-round users, but some of the people who come in as seasonal users, tourists, and people who have semi-permanent homes in the area? And certainly it's becoming more and more popular that people want to be able to bike to town or take an ATV or an electronic bike or something like that to town. Capitalizing on the regional benefits, being in close proximity to some major cities, but also creating connections to some of the adjacent towns. Wilmington came up a number of times. And then providing year-round use facilities. So a community center was assessed and analyzed. This would really require probably a separate master planning process due to the expense of developing a community center. But there are certainly great opportunities, especially close to the commercial core, for the development of such a facility. People were really interested in doing things like pump tracks, a skate park. We got a lot of interest from private property owners about that, where there might be partnerships in the future with the town, and certainly disc golf came up again. And then providing historic interpretation opportunities. So Dover is a really wonderful and unique place, and if you're looking at multi-generational opportunities or educational opportunities, you can capitalize on some of the historic resources that exist within the town. So now we're going to get a little bit more site-specific. Over the course of the master planning process, when we first joined the project, there were discussions about purchasing this property. And then I think it was maybe 6 months after we had started the process, or maybe even a little bit earlier than that, the town did decide to purchase what is now known as Horace Hill. It's just south of the Dover Town Park on Route 100. I expect most of you know where that is. And so this is a really interesting piece of property. It's 50 acres. It's relatively steep. What's wonderful about it is it's really on that commercial corridor, and there is potential to purchase additional property adjacent to the site that would then provide venues or space for venues to meet some of these other objectives like a skate park or disc golf. Also, there are opportunities within the property to improve the trails and expand the trails to meet some of the objectives like having disc golf on that property, potentially mountain bike pump tracks, which of course would require additional property as well, but we do think that the property is really well sited for multiple skill levels. As long as it's very well designed, and the other thing that's very important about this property is that everybody who has sort of a stake on the property, who wants to have these different recreational opportunities, gets in at the design process early in the game, so that the trails are designed to meet all of these uses from the get-go, so that you don't have to go back in and redesign everything later. Go ahead. Dover Town Forest. This is an absolutely huge property. We got to explore some of the trails when we were out there. It was really funny. Every time John and I came out to do our field work, it was always raining. We don't know why, but it was always raining. But we were out in Dover Town Forest. One thing that John pointed out when we were up there that he thought was really unique about the property is a significant elevation. So he thought that, especially in the context of climate change, that this might be a property where you still are able to get adequate snow cover over a long period of time throughout the year. So his recommendation, in tandem with Weston and Sampson, was to really develop the property with Nordic skiing in mind, potentially, Nordic uses. And so, but the thing that's tricky about this property is we definitely saw a lot of conflicting interests here, where there are people who use this really for nature watching and relaxing. They're out there, they want to just be at peace. There are a lot of people who live around the property, and they don't want to see a lot of really intensive uses. So I think it's important when you all get into the design phase to design the trails in such a way that you're still providing opportunities for respite in the town forest, and also that you protect a lot of the sensitive resources that are in there, because there are quite a lot of wetlands, and definitely when we did our habitat assessments or our mapping, that there are some sensitive ecological areas. The Dover School. This is a little bit of a tricky site in that it's public and private use, but there isn't really delineation as to where the school property starts and where it ends. It all belongs to the town, but it's not necessarily a great idea to have random people out on school property while school is in session. So that can be a safety concern. So that's really the primary objective before any improvements gets made, is working with the school to figure out how it would be possible to do some of these improvements but still protect the privacy and safety of the students. There's a lot of existing amenities out there, baseball fields, there's some sport court facilities, there's playgrounds. They're just not in the best condition at the moment, so even making improvements to some of those facilities would really help the town. And it's already a site where kids are going, and there's plenty of room to expand and put in things like Gaga Ball and some better recreational opportunities for kids on that site. Dovertown Park, it's a tiny little parcel. It's already very, very well designed. It's a beautiful, absolutely beautiful site. So most of our recommendations here are to make it as accessible as possible. For example, the amphitheater, not the amphitheater, but the pavilion in the center of the park, it would be nice to have an accessible walkway to it, maybe some accessible walkways to different amenities in the park, accessible benches, things like that. So people who might have mobility issues are able to utilize the park. And then from there, definitely utilizing the park as much as possible for some of the cultural activities such as concerts, plays, poetry readings, things like that that could potentially happen in the town.
So the Valley Trail, which is definitely an asset to the town, provides that connection through the center of the commercial core. One thing we did see and hear pretty often was that there's just sections that need to be better signage. We know it's in progress, but signage really will help guide many users through the trail and to know where destinations can be and where they can end up if they were to ride that trail. Mostly from a visitor standpoint. Obviously, residents are going to know how far it is to get to their destinations, but as you're trying to attract more users to that trail facility and connect to other resources within the kind of valley section, it's good for them to know where to go. There's also sections that need to be repaired and maintained, knowing that the variability of the trail, it's not necessarily a consistent surface or condition, improving the trail so that it is reliable, it is accessible for the various user groups, would lead to a better facility and definitely more usership as time moves on. The Crosstown Trail is a great resource, obviously connecting through the town. It can handle increased usage with improvements. Again, wayfinding and interpretive signage would provide users to know where they can get to and from on this trail connection through a simple kiosk or wayfinding signs. Really just know as how this connect to the greater town. And connecting back to the commercial core or up to kind of residential areas, just so users know how to connect and use this facility for the various recreational use.
Mount Snow Golf Club, this was identified as an opportunity. John loved this golf club and thought, especially due to its proximity to crosstown trails and to Sherwood Forest, that it would be an excellent resource potentially for Nordic skiing. There's already snowmaking that happens adjacent to the property. There are already utilities there that could be used to create snowmaking. He thought it would be a great resource for Nordic skiing in the winter as long as the golf club is amenable. And he has seen this work at different sites across the country and even around the world where people are able to take golf courses that would typically only have use during the summer and turn it into a year-round recreational opportunity. So that's why that felt really like a great opportunity for you all. But of course, it does require participation with the golf club. Handle Road and Sherwood Forest Trails, one thing to note about this is this property is owned by Mount Snow. They are working in great partnership with the town of Dover on this. So there are just extraordinary opportunities to redevelop some of these trails for expanded use. In particular, we were looking at widened trails with an adequate cross slope that in the wintertime could be used for Nordic skiing, and the summertime that would be appropriate for mountain biking, but also just for hiking. There's enough land there where you could do stacked loops. You could have trails for designated uses as well. As with any property in the town of Dover, you do all have quite a few wetlands and you have a lot of very, very steep conditions. And so making sure that as you go into the design of the trails, that it's a comprehensive approach that avoids some of the sensitive ecological resources, but also creates trails that are not going to erode over time because they're overly steep. And because we did see that quite a bit during our field analysis, you know, some of the trails over time have just been built by enthusiasts, which is awesome, but they might not be necessarily sited in the best way that would accommodate expanded use. So it's a very good idea to make sure that the trails that are designed can handle the quantity of people that you all would like to attract.
So overall, we had a number of goals, and I'll run through each of these here in the next slide. But one of the biggest things that we see in master plans, and it's relevant here as well, is just improving operational efficiencies. And that really comes down to one is you're working with very limited staff, so obviously you're being as efficient as you can and using a lot of the volunteer efforts, and just continue to stay on top of that so that you're spending money wisely and using the money that you have towards the best and greatest benefit for the town. Next is improving the communication tools. You know that sometimes it's hard to get word out to potential users, to expand user groups or just to different types of users, but really just growing that activities and services as the facilities improve really will help to expand the potential users within the town. We heard a lot about improving programs and services. I'll touch upon that here in a minute, as well as improving trail system and existing facilities. Most of the time when we get into working on master plans, everyone thinks of the newest and greatest improvement is where they should invest their money because it's the newest thing on the block. But really, we really stress upon maintaining and improving existing facilities that you have. Get those really in the ground and up to snuff. And then also contribute to building new facilities, just so that you aren't overwhelming any staff or just the maintenance needs and the cost expenditures to the town for years to come. Next, develop new facilities and amenities. Continue to acquire lands for conservation and or development for recreational facilities. And then finally, improve wayfinding and interpretive amenities. So as mentioned, improve overall efficiencies. One thing that came out of the master planning process really was to develop a trails recreation department, really to define a department that can take on the roles and responsibilities that's needed within the town. This may consist of hiring a superintendent or a programming coordinator, really to help to lead that and guide, chaperone that process. That would also be supported by a committee that could take this master plan and move it forward. I mentioned improving communication tools, overall improving the department website so that any mapping and resources that have been produced or will be produced are accessible to users either digitally or on paper format or postings as necessary within the town. I'm really just getting the word out so that when visitors do come to visit the town for either Mount Snow or other recreational interests, they can be exposed to all the benefits that exist within the town, existing and in the future. Improving services and programs. Really, we know that recreational programming offerings are within town. We heard a lot of increasing and growing those offerings and just update them annually. There are some programs that are going to have a down year or possibly drop off the preferred list just due to users' interests and to growing types of activities or growing generational demands. So just paying attention to those programming offerings and continue to collaborate with others that provide services so that as a community you're supporting everyone, not just those that are sponsored by the town itself. We mentioned a lot about continuing to improve, enhancing the trail system. One of the key pieces to this is making sure that trails appeal to a diverse user group as much as possible. We know that there are some trails that simply are only going to appeal to some high-level expert users or specific modes of activity. But the more diversity or the more variety you have of trails for those learners all the way to experts, it's just going to broaden the spectrum of users interested in coming to Dover to use your facilities. And finally, as part of maintaining and improving facilities, one piece that is always needed is to improve ADA access. So ensuring that access is available to users of all ages and abilities, whether it's from a simple sidewalk connection or improving a trail or a court surface that's accessible for users to accommodate their needs. We mentioned developing new facilities. Really the highest level of this is to study the feasibility of a community center. This goes through a programming study which would define how big should rooms be based upon the size of user groups and the quantity of users that would be using those facilities, as much as how would it be staffed, what would be the cost to operate a facility, and how would you fund that. So really developing that feasibility study, providing that multi-season recreational venue will be beneficial to the town. Number 7, acquire lands for conservation and or development. Really thinking through as lands become available or before they come available to know what is the strategy and how the town can acquire more lands either for preservation or simply to expand and implement the master plan where it's beneficial to the town. And finally, developing an overall standardized system of signage so that when users come to town, they know they're on a town-owned trail. It's the same language across all the trails. So users are familiar, and it can definitely have great access to trails from a signage standpoint.
So with all of this, these are a lot of goals. There's a lot to think about, and a great deal of improvements are within the document to be made. And so we want to take a look at how can this be done, and how can it be done in a phased approach that will work with the current economic situation of the town. That being said, things change all the time, and there is a lot of internal dialogue that happens between the town and private stakeholders that may cause one of these to move up in the process due to a variety of factors like a grant coming through or private property becoming available. But in general, this phased approach that we're about to outline is conservative, and that is so that Dover is able to sort of bite off what it can handle at one time. So starting with the first project, we have recommended to go ahead and make improvements to town forest. Overall, to make signage improvements around the town. We noticed that that was a pretty big challenge. You have some excellent trail systems, even as is, but it's very hard to figure out where you are once you're on the trails, and I know that you have some trail mapping, but people might be more likely to come and use those existing amenities if wayfinding was better. With that, creating a historical interpretation program throughout the town to start attracting some of those the families that you're looking to bring into the town. And with the first project, the other thing that we're trying to think about is, what does the town already have? What does the town already have? And what does the town already know that it can maintain? So biting off projects that you have the resources to handle at the moment. So in project 2, we start to discuss the hiring of staff to manage and maintain more parks and trail resources, because we have found again and again that when towns go in and start to implement some of these improvements without adequate staffing, that you can spend a great deal of money on making things great, but then it really degrades over time because you don't have the maintenance folded into it. So we highly recommend that you get the staffing levels up before you start making major changes. So with that, the newly acquired Horace Hill property, start to develop that for disc golf and some of the multi-use trails that we recommended. And again, trying to design everything in tandem, hopefully at the beginning of the process, all the stakeholders on board as much as possible, so that you're designing at once and creating really excellent trails, because this venue is very unique in that it's very, very close to that commercial core, and you definitely want to make sure you do it right. Project 3 is going to require some funding. That includes the purchase of additional property along Route 100 where possible for the development of some of these other recreational opportunities, which might include skate park. Skate park came up again and again that people were really interested in, outdoor or indoor, and there were some private partnerships or private facilities that were interested in hosting it. Pump track was another thing that people talked about quite a bit. That's relatively, in the grand scheme of things, inexpensive to build, and that could really attract some of the families that you're looking to bring into the town. Project 4 is to realign and rehabilitate the existing trails on town and public-private partnerships to create some of these multi-sport and multi-season opportunities. So this might be the Handle Road or Sherwood Forest properties. Some of the larger parcels where you really would have to get in there and start developing these larger trail systems, which might be more expensive and very much labor intensive. And then Project 5 is to go ahead and start to take a really close look at trail connections between the residential areas and commercial and town-owned properties. This is a very complicated endeavor in that there are a great deal of private properties where these trails would have to be a line to cross through those properties, which gets into easements, and a lot of logistical work that needs to happen. So it's even possible that this is project 5, but you're starting to have some of the conversations with these landowners in the first phase of the project, so that over time you have the ability to implement the trails when you do have the resources available.
So as we've gone through all these, one of the biggest things, like Rochelle was just mentioning, is our plan. The goal of our plan is to define potential projects or groupings of projects, but it's going to take many different avenues to get to the end goal. One of which is funding. So it's definitely a great idea to look for funding opportunities through grants or bonds or other donations if possible. While at the same time, as you're acquiring land or looking at improved facilities, is talking to adjacent landowners, continue to get consensus from residents or those within the town, the buy-in, so that once the money is in hand, it's available to be used to either acquire land or to start the design process. Several of these improvements that we've mentioned in our plan do not require design. It can basically be purchased off the shelf per se, or done with volunteer services. But some do require the design needed for implementation. So for those who suggest having a designer, either engineer, landscape architect, or a survey, whatever the need is for that specific project, really to guide the process through the reviews, approvals, and permitting process for the projects. Permittings and appeals or approvals really is necessary for many of the projects. So just having the paperwork in hand prior to construction really is a critical piece in all this. And finally, just continuing to communicate is really critical of all project success. So even before the bulldozers show up for a design construction project, it's making sure that everyone's aware of the time, the process that's necessary before improvements are going to happen. And then once construction starts, communicate that timing of what's going to happen, what the end results will be, is really critical for everyone to engage throughout the design and construction process. So with that, we want to thank everybody for your time. It's been a great process. We think you have a great plan here to step forward to implement several projects. Some are low cost, some are more expensive, but we think that the variety that is presented to you will handle the next 10 to 15 years, and hopefully we can answer any questions.
I see that it's starting to get a little dark in the room. It's getting dark so early now.
Or just shady people.
Yeah, I mean, now that we're not trying to look at it.
Okay, so our room mic is on. Does anybody out there have questions?
Okay, so Sarah Shippey has questions. She is on the Dover Selectboard.
So one of the things that you mentioned was a community center.
We can hear you.
Okay. The fact that there's one being built in Wilmington, would that be considered, would we be draining too much by having one here and one in Wilmington, or is that not usually an issue?
I don't think that during the master planning process that we were aware of the community center in Wilmington. Dan, do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I don't think when we heard, in the stakeholder input process, we just heard there's a demand, a need, desire for a Dover Community Center. I was not aware that there was one being constructed in close proximity. Now, with that being said, if the facility is of a decent size, we would strongly recommend collaborating with them to meet the needs of the town. Why duplicate if you don't need to? But I don't think we know of any details about the size or what's being offered at that facility.
Well, it's the old high school, so it's fairly large. They run pickleball there. They have a league that runs through there. There's a number of businesses in there. And the old high school is on Route 9, or off Route 9/100 behind the Richards Insurance Building.
It's right in the middle of town.
Right in the middle of Wilmington. There's a Dover bus stop there. And, so it's accessible. My question was more, in a similar situation with two relatively smaller towns, does it make sense to have two community centers, or does it make sense to kind of throw away towards collaborating with them on some programs that could take place in Dover without us necessarily building a community center?
Yeah, I mean, at first pass, my suggestion is does not at all hurt to collaborate with the town, between the two towns, to meet the needs of both groups of residents. And if demand grows to the point when you all need your own facility and it's worth the investment, then I would probably jump through those steps to execute your own structure. Because knowing the finances of these facilities, they're pretty expensive even just to operate. If you have a room like you're in right now, it may not get used every minute of the day. So that's just, in theory, expense occurred by the town to maintain community spaces. They're beneficial for the peak hours and peak needs within the town. But I would collaborate first, possibly set up a shuttle system if necessary for those that don't have access that far away for whatever reason. But that would be my first thought on how to meet the needs for a community center. And then if demand is so strong, then move forward with developing your own facility.
And I think that would also require probably a feasibility study for a community center, like Dan was saying, just because of the expense of operating those. So you'd really want to take a close financial look at it to make sure that you were going to get a return on the investment and that it really made sense.
I also wanted to ask for the pump track and the skate park. Have you identified areas you think would be preferable purchases of land, or have you calculated the acreage that would be needed for either of those things?
We had quite a few conversations. There was an outdoor sporting goods store. I had a meeting months ago with Steve Naratko and the owner of that store, and I'm unfortunately blanking on his name at this point, but he was really interested in partnering with the town of Dover potentially. I know that there were some issues at that time because he didn't actually own the property. He was only leasing the property, and this was on Route 100.
Compete with Invasion.
That's right. That's correct. Yeah, thanks for the reminder. Yeah, so I'm not sure how that developed over time and if he was able to purchase that property, but that sounded like a promising partnership and there would have been adequate space. We would need to look at the master plan. I do believe that we did identify in the detailed estimates square footage for those facilities and an estimated cost. We did look with or work with a pump track developer to get an idea, I believe, of cost per square foot on a pump track. And certainly for any of those facilities, the recommendation would be to purchase property close to either Horace Hill or Town Park, somewhere close to that commercial core, because you're going to have a lot of visitation there. And that's both of those are really great opportunities to bring in tourism and to have people who come in, use the skate park or use the pump track, and then go out and get lunch and, get coffee or whatever it may be. And it also provides awesome opportunities for teenagers in the town, which we heard a lot, that, there's just not a lot out there right now for that age group. So I hope that answers your question. I do believe in the master plan we have square footage required for those amenities, estimated cost.
For the pump track, I just did dirt. The industry is going now towards just doing asphalt pump tracks. This
Yep.
one had rollerbladers, skateboarders, all the other usages versus dirt just being for bikes.
And the price varies very
It's
drastically.
extremely more
depending on
expensive for the asphalt, but it does allow you to have more user
Yeah.
groups actually use the property, so you get more for the money.
Yeah, and I believe the supplier we were talking to, or the manufacturer, is Velo Solutions.
That's audio.
Yeah. And they do a lot of these, it's their bread and butter, and
Yeah.
they seem relatively straightforward. Yeah.
That seems to be what most towns are doing this way. You can have rollerbladers, scooters, whatever.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah. Okay.
And it doesn't require a ton of space, which is really ideal. But you do need, what I do remember is you need some level ground to start with, because it's much more expensive to try to construct a track like that when you have a hilly site or a site that's up a hill or something like that. Level ground is much less expensive because you can just sort of start from scratch.
Jeremy? Well,
Kathy Friedman.
okay, and Jeremy has his hand raised. to the meeting. Two totally separate questions. One, as this whole process was going on and the plan was being developed, COVID popped up in the middle of all of that. So the thought might be is what pieces of this plan might need to be rethought or readjusted due to the uncertainty of, now this, like 3/4 of everything is outdoors, but things like amphitheaters or other close contact things, anything indoor that may need some rethinking. And I saw a skating rink in there, and when that popped up at one of the first meetings, I just sort of did a little nosing around, and there were some really amazing surfaces that would provide year-round skating surfaces.
Yeah.
So if we have a place for that or whatever, it's not a winter-only piece. It
Right.
could be
That's true.
year-round for
There's also, I
skating.
think they did a case, remember what they did over at the end, where they just, they gave a temporary pond?
Right.
I mean, that's another option.
What's another option is creating, water surface, but the thought looking towards full year possible usability for hockey teams or figure skaters or whatever. So just that happened to pop up. And
So go
Jeremy, let's go to Jeremy. Jeremy, can you unmute?
Yes, thank you so much, everybody. Just a quick note that the speakers that are not closer to the mic are hard to hear on Zoom, like Steve and Sarah. Just if anyone else, probably put the mask just out. Jeremy Kirk, West Dover Church. I was just wondering if you could speak to any advice or ideas you have on priorities and winter versus off-ski season investment.
Dan, do you want to I could handle the first question if you want to handle the second one.
Sure, right.
Okay. So to answer the question about COVID, some of these indoor facilities, in particular the skate park, which could be either indoor or outdoor, and the ice rink facility, the amphitheater, the community center, these will be fairly expensive projects, and they will take some time to design and will take some time to construct. And so I think that it's not something that I would, in my opinion, be completely concerned about at this point. I would get into the first phase of design development and see where we're at with COVID, because it all just kind of depends on how this unfolds. And there's a lot of information floating around right now, and not a lot of definitive answers about when a vaccine might be coming online or how long this is expected to last. And certainly you want to think about public safety measures and all possibilities, but that might end up being something that looks a bit more like programming. So you only have, a certain number of people on the skate track at the same time or in the ice rink at the same time. You might decide that an amphitheater is not a worthwhile investment right now. Wait until we get past the pandemic to start thinking about making an investment on an amphitheater. Or maybe that amphitheater is only outside and people aren't required to stay 6 feet apart. But I do feel, at least in our experience, that the design process takes a chunk of time, and I think that you'll be able to sort of reconsider as you get closer to the actual time where you begin construction.
There's a question about the phasing or, off season versus the winter season demands. I think from what we have heard is that there's a very strong winter sporting more culture, just due to historically Mount Snow, being there, operating, attracting skiers. Strong bodied users are coming to the town during that period, but maybe less visitors coming within the shoulder seasons or maybe in the summer. So I think in terms of where to implement improvements first, I think that the first is the shoulder season, having facilities that can be used in the early spring, say spring or late fall, pre-ski season. The middle summer, I think if you have trails, multi-use trails or specialty trails, those users they can mountain bike, they can hike or do nature walking. It's the shoulder seasons that are more challenging to accommodate, because you have wet, soft soils, you have possibly flooding, you have other kind of events occur during those periods that's hard to attract people to the town to use your facilities because it's outside of ski season or not the dry in summer. So it would be accommodating those users so that you can have a full year-round interest for various users.
And just one more note to add to that, and it's another one of those things that we really don't know how it's going to play out, but climate change is certainly a factor to consider. The climate does appear to be getting warmer. We're seeing some pretty wacky weather. I'm from Kentucky, and it was very cool and wet all summer, but up here it was broiling. So just keeping tabs on that and seeing how that unfolds. But it's another one of those things that you just kind of have to take it as it comes, because we have data, we have tons of data, but weather is what it is, and it's gonna kind of follow its own course. So, but just something to think about in terms of long-term planning. You want to make sure you're not completely reliant just on snow. Anybody else?
Rochelle, I forgot, when I was reading through this, I pointed out to Andy, I didn't realize this in our past conversations, but Dover is actually a 1 acre town, not a 10 acre town as it relates to Act 250.
I'm having trouble hearing you, Steve. Is there any way you could go closer to the mic?
Sorry. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Yes, you do. So in the report, you put for Act 250, which I appreciate you putting in.
Yeah.
You put that we were a 10 acre town. I didn't realize it when we had our conversations, but we are only a 1 acre town.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of drastically changes, the Act 250 thing. I mean, it may not be an issue in 3 months when they vote on it, but, right now we're still a 1 acre town, which means we can't.
Okay. Well, that's definitely something to keep in mind as you guys move forward. Yeah, keep tabs on that. Thanks for letting us know, though. That's a complicated issue for sure.
It really, really is.
Yeah.
Hi, Rochelle. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Andy.
It's Andy.
How's it going?
Hope you're all doing well. Fantastic job on the report, and I think the selectmen have a lot of decisions they need to make now, and they got some ideas to make decisions about. And I was wondering about one of the things that I'm really thinking about in your report is your recommendation of a department and a superintendent. And as far as, did you envision that as primarily for maintenance of existing facilities and perhaps new facilities? Or did you envision that as also implementing this plan and overseeing projects like major trail building or a facilities construction project? Did you see that department as implementing a plan or as maintenance of facilities once they're built?
I would say we looked at for both. I think having someone that relieves other staff that are kind of contributing, like yourself, to getting plans done or coordinating volunteer efforts by whoever's doing that right now, just having that key go-to person, whether it's a working superintendent or department lead, however it may end up being, that they're the go-to connection for this plan and existing and proposed facilities, and that potentially could grow as demand increases, whether it's from volunteers or actual field laborers to support making improvements and maintaining. So it was kind of like that go-to person, and also relieving other staff of duties that I think everyone else is contributing, but it may help to have that one person central point.
And I think that's especially true for like future decision making as well, because they're going to have a tab on what they can handle and what they can't, and what types of additional staffing might be needed, and what they think is a good idea based on what they see in the field day in and day out.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And anybody else?
I don't see anything popping up. Anybody else? Are there any questions from the field?
Okay. So hearing that, we're gonna get a copy of that PowerPoint.
It's actually
It's in here.
Yep.
I'll send it out.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We have a lot to think about. And thank you. It's been a pleasure working with you guys. And hopefully we can get some things moving. It takes energy and time and money, and we have varying degrees of all those things. But thank you very much. We appreciate your assistance, and we'll keep you posted how we move forward.
Yes, please do. Keep in touch.
Great. Thank you.
Stay safe, everybody.
Bye.
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 Okay, so in the. Yeah, we didn't print everything inside.
I just wanted to really that PowerPoint.
The one that I got outside.
No,
Huh?
we should. We got that electronically.
When can I get that?
Gabby,
Yes.
can you tell them I will send the PowerPoint?
I'm sorry, guys, hang on a second. I'm sorry, Shannon, what was that?
I will send out the PowerPoint in just a few minutes to the board,
Thank you.
and then we'll post it. I'm going to send it with the minutes, which I've been taking. And when have you adjourned this meeting? What time?
I'm recording the meeting right now at 7:28. 7:28.
Okay,
I second it.
okay, so recording.